Hello Bio 2, we're continuing on with Chapter 27, or Section 2 with roundworms, and this is going to be one of the probably more disgusting sections because this is going to be which roundworms can cause the human disease. So what roundworms can actually cause disease inside of us? So there are going to be 4 types of roundworms that can cause disease in humans. First one is trichinosis causing worms, filarial worms, ascarid worms, and hookworms. So these are going to be 4 types of worms that will cause disease inside of humans. So our first one is trichinosis causing worms. So the trichinosis comes from the fact that the worm is called the trichinella worm, and they live and mate in the intestines of their hosts. And so female worms will carry fertilized eggs, and they burrow into the intestinal wall and they release larvae. So first step is female worm gets inside of you and it's carrying their fertilized eggs. They burrow into your intestines and then they will release their larvae. And then the larvae will travel through the bloodstream and burrow into organs and tissues. And from there, the larvae will form cysts and they'll become inactive in the host muscle tissue. So they can just live as cysts inside the muscle tissue of the host. And they will complete their life cycle only when another animal eats the muscle tissue containing these cysts. And therefore humans will get trichinosis by eating raw or incompletely cooked pork. So never eat undercooked pork because there could be some cysts from some trichinella worms, and then you'll ingest those and will come down with trichinosis. So nobody wants that. So that's how you get the first one, by eating incompletely cooked pork. So our next worms are filarial worms, and these are thread-like worms that live in the blood and lymph vessels of birds and mammals. And they get into humans by biting insects. So from anywhere, they're transmitted by biting insects. And large numbers of filarial worms may block the passage of fluids within lymph vessels and cause swelling. So if you get into your lymph nodes, and they could cause swelling there. So that's how you get filarial worms. Again, if you're bitten by some type of biting insect that has the worm inside of them, then the worm will come into you and you will see or feel the effects of the worm. So our next one is ascarid worms. So they give one example here of Ascaris lumbricoides, I'm pretty sure is how you'd say that, is a serious parasite of humans and many other vertebrate animals, and it will absorb digestive food from our small intestine, and it is commonly spread by eating foods that are not washed properly. So they break it down and give us the life cycle of kind of how it works inside of humans. So here's what happens. So first step is a human will ingest food or water that contains the Ascaris eggs. So that's the first step. Then the eggs will travel to the small intestine and develop into larvae. So again, pointing to our small intestine there, that's step number 2. Step number 3, the larvae will enter our blood vessels and they're carried to our lungs, which you can see there, pointing to our lungs. So then the larvae will actually enter into our lungs. And then the larvae are coughed up, so we cough them up out of our lungs, and then we swallow them. So it's basically coughing up a loogie that be filled with ascarid worms, and then they'll travel to our small intestine where they develop to maturity, and then eggs are released and they leave the host into feces. And that says in faces where it should say in feces. There we go. So then that's a nice life cycle there. They develop inside our lungs, we cough them up and swallow them again. So our last one are hookworms. So hookworm eggs will hatch and develop in the soil, and then they will use sharp tooth-like plates and hooks to burrow into the skin and enter the bloodstream. And since they live in the soil, you're usually going to get them when you are walking around barefoot. And then the hookworms will travel through the blood of their host to the lungs and down to the intestines, and there they suck the host blood, causing weakness and poor growth. So hookworms are some pretty nasty things, as well as all these other worms. So that's it for our roundworms. Let me know if you have any questions.